Okay, so let's dig into something pretty fascinating. What if I told you that some of the best, most effective teaching strategies we have today weren't dreamed up in a modern lab? What if they were actually outlined by a philosopher thousands of years ago?
So let me just ask you this. When you think about where the science of memory and learning comes from, what pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably something fairly recent, but the real starting point, well, it's a lot older than you might think.
Yeah, you're probably picturing those shiny modern labs, with brain scans, MRIs, and all these super controlled studies. And look, that's a huge part of where we are now, for sure. But the actual foundation of it all, it wasn't built with any of that technology. It was built way back in ancient Greece, using just two things: careful observation and pure, brilliant human insight.
And the person behind it all, the original architect? None other than Aristotle. Yep, over 2,000 years before anyone even knew what a neuron was, he was mapping out the fundamental principles of how our minds link ideas together. We now call them the laws of association. So let's break down his 3 laws because they are still unbelievably relevant.
All right, first up, we have what he called the law of similarity. I like to think of it as building a similarity bridge. This was Aristotle's first big insight into how memory works. Our minds connect things that resemble each other.
What Aristotle noticed was actually pretty simple, but it's also profound. Our brains just don't store information in little isolated boxes. Nope. When you learn something new, your brain immediately starts rummaging around, looking for anything it already knows that's kind of like it. That resemblance, that similarity, that's the glue for memory.
And you see this in action everywhere, especially in the classroom, right? It's the whole reason a super complex organ like the human heart suddenly clicks when you compare it to a simple pump. It's why fractions, which can be so abstract, make instant sense when you think of them as slices of a pizza. Similarity is like a mental shortcut.
And here's where it gets really wild. What Aristotle figured out just by thinking, modern cognitive science has proven in the lab. He called it similarity. Today we call it schema theory. This idea that our brains build knowledge by fitting new stuff into mental frameworks we already have. The guy was literally 2,300 years ahead of the curve.
So, what does this mean for anyone trying to teach something? Well, you've got to put it to work. Use analogies all the time. Constantly build bridges from your new topic back to something the students already get. And even better, get them to create their own comparisons. This isn't just some cute memory trick. It's like a turbo boost for learning.
Okay, on to the second law. We've talked about how alike things stick together. Now let's flip that on its head and talk about the incredible power of opposites. This is Aristotle's law of contrast.
Aristotle also saw that our brains do this other funny thing. They love to pair opposites. Think about one extreme, and its counterpart just naturally pops into your head. It turns out that a really sharp difference between two ideas doesn't push them apart in our memory. It actually forges a super strong link between them. And it makes perfect sense when you think about it. How can you really truly understand the concept of hot if you don't understand cold? The idea of democracy becomes so much clearer when you put it right next to dictatorship. And let's be honest, our entire idea of success is shaped by our understanding of failure. The contrast doesn't create confusion. It actually creates clarity.
And the payoff for education here is absolutely huge. When we teach by using contrast, we're doing more than just helping students remember facts. We are actively sharpening their critical thinking skills. We're training their brains to analyze, to spot differences, and to understand ideas with way more depth and nuance.
So, how do we do this? Well, classic tools like Venn diagrams or compare and contrast charts are perfect. They're basically Aristotle's law on a worksheet. They force you to see what's the same and what's different. Oh, and here's a big one. Don't be afraid to talk about common misconceptions. Pitting a wrong idea against the right one can be one of the most powerful ways to make the right one stick.
Okay, so we've got similarity and we've got contrast. Aristotle's third and final law is all about proximity. It's about how things that happen close to each other, either in time or in space, get kind of fused together in our minds. He called this the law of contiguity. And it's pretty simple. If two things happen together, your brain connects them. This can be about sequence, one thing happens right after another, or it can be about location. Two things are experienced in the same physical place.
You know this feeling. It's why hearing a specific song can instantly beam you back to a summer vacation from years ago.
In school, it's why a lesson taught the day before a big holiday break might stick in a student's head forever, or why a certain activity gets mentally tied to a specific corner of the classroom. The context gets tangled up with the memory itself.
And here it is again, this jaw-dropping link to modern science. Aristotle's law of contiguity is basically the philosophical version of one of the most famous sayings in all of neuroscience: neurons that fire together, wire together. He somehow intuited the core mechanism of how our brains physically learn and form connections. It's just mind-blowing.
So the takeaway here is to be really deliberate about sequence and context. Don't just throw out a bunch of disconnected facts. Weave them into a story. I mean, storytelling is the ultimate tool for contiguity, right? It arranges events into a memorable chain of cause and effect. If you can link your lessons to real life, you're tapping directly into this ancient and powerful law of memory. So when we step back and look at these three laws together, it becomes crystal clear why Aristotle can be called the original architect of memory. These aren't just some dusty 2,300-year-old ideas. They are the living, breathing foundation of how we learn effectively.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It really puts it all into perspective. For more than 2,000 years, Aristotle's ideas were basically the only game in town. And when scientists finally started studying memory in labs in the late 1800s, they didn't throw his ideas out. They just built onto them. And now, today, our most advanced neuroscience is simply showing us the pictures of what he figured out with pure logic.
And that's really the biggest point of all. These aren't some abstract philosophical things. They are the practical, everyday tools of great teaching. Anytime you use an analogy, bam, that's the law of similarity. Ask your students to compare and contrast two things, that's the law of contrast. Tell a story to explain a chain of events, you're using the law of contiguity. Which brings us to what I think is the core idea here. We can get so focused on the what, the content, the facts we need to deliver. But Aristotle's real lesson is that the magic is in the how. It's about how we connect all that information. The best teachers aren't just information presenters, they are architects of connection. So I'll just leave you with this one final question to think about. Whether you're teaching, leading, or just trying to learn something yourself, ask this. Are you just laying down isolated bricks of information, one after another? Or are you consciously, intentionally building the bridges between them? Because when it comes to the architecture of memory, it's those connections that make all the difference. And we have Aristotle to thank for drawing up the original blueprints.